Let's talk about some rules and regulations governing school districts across Ohio. The free and public education system in the United States is unique and considered a safeguard of freedom. The educational programs of the school would be ineffective without the support of the government, the family, and the church. The federal government is composed of three distinct branches: legislative, executive, and judicial, whose powers are vested by the U.S. Constitution in the Congress, the President, and the federal courts. In the United States, carrying out educational goals is actually the responsibility of each individual state. So, how does it work? Even though it's the responsibility of each state to carry out educational goals, the federal government is extensively involved in education, primarily through legislation passed in both houses of Congress and signed into law by the President. The Elementary and Secondary Education Act of 1965 was the first federal legislation that laid out the parameters of a free and adequate public education, and it has gone through several changes and iterations over the years. It was most recently reauthorized through the Every Student Succeeds Act in 2017. The authority of the states to create and govern public schools is embodied in the state constitution. The administrative arm of most state legislatures is the State Department of Education. It is the Ohio Department of Education, often referred to as ODE, that creates rules, regulations, standards, and other guidance for local boards of education to interpret, implement, and follow. As we review the primary rules and regulations governing school districts in Ohio, it is the federal government that sets the stage with the U.S. Constitution. Specific amendments which often impact the field of education include the First Amendment, as it relates to free speech, the Fourth Amendment in cases of search and seizure, and due process as protected by the 14th Amendment. All school districts across the United States must ensure they follow these supreme laws of the land, or else they are open to potential litigation. Beyond the Constitution, there are federal regulations that all states must follow and comply with. The major piece of legislation impacting school today is the Every Student Succeeds Act, authorized in 2017. However, several other significant laws impact public education in Ohio and beyond, such as the Individuals with Disabilities Act, or IDEA, the Americans with Disabilities Act, and the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act, or FERPA. It is up to each state to interpret these pieces of legislation and address them in the state's educational plan and governance structure. Ohio has several mechanisms in place to assure compliance with federal regulations that all teachers need to be aware of. The Ohio Constitution, Ohio Revised Code, and Ohio Administrative Code are all in place to provide further guidance to local school districts. Ohio Revised Code are the general laws of the state of Ohio. The Revised Code is organized into 31 general titles broken into chapters dealing with individual topics of law. The chapters are divided into sections which contain the text of individual statutes. The laws are collected and published in the Ohio Revised Code, sometimes referred to as ORC or RC. Ohio Administrative Code are the rules adopted by the agencies of the state of Ohio. State agencies adopt rules to carry out the policies and intent of laws passed by the General Assembly. The rules are collected and published in the Ohio Administrative Code, often referred to as OAC or AC. On a local level, it becomes a responsibility of the Board of Education to understand and interpret the Ohio Revised Code and Ohio Administrative Code, and then create a local governance structure. In public school districts across Ohio, Board of Education members are elected positions. Each local Board of Education, sometimes referred to as the BOE, works with the district superintendent and other administrators to write and adopt bylaws, policies, and administrative guidelines for the school district. The responsibilities of the Board of Education, who are democratically elected officials, are basically to formulate these policies for government and administration and to update them as needed. It's important to note that while education is a state function and the state does have regulatory authority, that local districts in Ohio remain in control of the schools themselves. This means that the local Board of Education officials are the people who are in charge of setting rules and policies for each community. Those rules will vary from school district to school district, from community to community. There are many factors that impact the rules and regulations governing school districts in Ohio, but ultimately, it is up to each local Board of Education to create policies that reflect federal, state, and local constitutions, laws, and court decisions. In this way, all public school districts are the same across Ohio, while possessing the ability to set policies that are specific to their own local community. Ohio has a set of operating standards for school districts that are based on Ohio Revised Code and Ohio Administrative Code. The Ohio operating standards are in place to establish specific expectations and guidelines for use in creating learning conditions that meet student needs and achieve state and local educational goals and objectives. The operating standards are in the form of 11 administrative rules. State regulations require all programs for teacher preparation to assure that teacher education students are familiar with the Ohio operating standards and other associated items in order to be granted a teaching license. This means if you hope to become a licensed teacher in the state of Ohio, you need to become well versed with all the rules and regulations governing education in our state. Your future career as an educator is dependent on your understanding and implementation of not only the operating standards, but also the Ohio standards for the teaching profession and the Ohio standards for professional development.